Yo, 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 yo. What is going on, COD Familia? It is your boy BN, aka Mr. Kingdom Builder. And in today's video of CoDRAMA, we are going to be talking about migration. And I'm going to try and keep things as simple and straightforward and probably not make this out to be too long, hopefully. Wink, wink. As always, if you enjoy the content, make sure you throw us some because it helps out a lot. So the first thing I want to touch on is there has been a number of people in the community and some topics as of late regarding the fact that some kingdoms have been growing so much in power and in size. And the fact that the migration cap or slots are the same across every single kingdom. And more specifically, the kingdoms that are 1 through 10 and 22 through 90. And I'm going to give you an example here. Then we're going to talk a little bit about this, and we'll show you some data too as well. So if I look at SB2, you'll notice that there's no full kingdoms here, even though these kingdoms probably ended up getting a recent cap increase for kingdom power. Now, we know that this is probably the case because the interview I did with Ossie and Leo a while back, the callofdragons community managers, Ossie is no longer with us currently, they ended up stating, I believe Leo said this, that each season the kingdom cap will increase, meaning you'll be able to bring in more and more players from season to season until eventually it plateaus at a certain season. And so from there, you end up getting a situation where we don't have any full status kingdoms. However, if we go to these for Season of Strife, we have the pre-war servers here for ST1 or Tamara season. We have some fulls, right? And that's because their kingdom cap's a little bit lower. Same thing when we look at SB1. However, the challenge is that if we look at each of the kingdoms, for crowded, I have 300 to 300 slots. If I look at active, I have 300 over 300. And if I look at normal, I have 300 over 300. So how this used to work, for those of us that remember, is that normal would give you 350 slots, active would give you 200, and crowded we always kind of figured was anywhere from 75 to 100, but then we later realized that you could actually be one player away if you hit crowded from then going to full. However, usually it was typically more than that. And now every single kingdom in SB2 is all 300. And you end up getting to this situation where now we're going to show you off some data here, where you look at some of these top kingdoms, and I actually just added this new column for migration to show you how many people migrated into these kingdoms from SB2 before the migration window was cut off once we got to the matchmaking phase for SOS, for Season of Strife. And you can see here that part of me feels like we're going to get into this situation of 1093 and 1196 from Rise of Kingdoms, and I'm sure there's a couple other kingdoms as well that took advantage of this early on. But for those of you, to give you a quick history lesson, these kingdoms, among a few others, were a part of some of the early migration hoarders, if you will, that really took advantage in Rise of Kingdoms back when migration rules were more lax. And you could just get so many people in as fast as possible and very much easier than you are able to do now. And this allowed for these kingdoms to basically become super kingdoms. And this is one of the reasons why you started seeing more harsher migration rules and restrictions. And then eventually they ended up coming out with the Imperium system. And this was to try to cap off a lot of the top kingdoms from growing too much in power, so the ones in the middle and the lower end could catch up, like the rising stars, the ones who were really working their way towards growing in power could catch up, and then you'd be able to have a lot more balanced or fair KVK matchmaking. I mean, it makes sense. If you have only 20 kingdoms that are within top power of each other, and then the rest of the kingdoms are 5-10 billion power away, that is going to create some mismatches. But if you have 100 kingdoms that are all within 1 to 2 billion power of each other, right, that's a lot better, or even if it's a couple at that point. And so that, to me, I think, is one of the things that immediately sticks out. Is I look at a kingdom like 23, where they're probably already, because again, remember this data, we started pulling it on the 3rd of July, so it's about 3 to 5 days old, which still is not incredibly old or outdated. However, you look at this and you say to yourself, well, okay, they're 35. Then there's 28.5, which is, 6.5 build diff. And then you have 2.3 build difference. Or sorry, 3.2 if I can do math, build difference here from 2 to 3. And then you see it does start getting a little bit closer, 25, 24, 24, 23. But then really once you get to like 21 or so, that's when it starts getting a lot closer, like 18 to 21. There's a nice range. And then you see a couple 17s and 16s. It drops a little bit more there at 14. And then you can kind of start seeing it going down and down and down, right? Now, once again, the challenge to me is that with the kingdom cap increase, it has allowed so much power to come in to these kingdoms, to some kingdoms, that the kingdom cap, to me, it almost feels like has been raised the most from this most recent season, from SB2 going into the next season, in this case, just SOS. Compared to maybe I don't know if it feels like that to other people. It does feel like that to me, and I'd love to know what you guys think. Because I very much feel like the kingdom cap has been increased so much this season, a lot more than it has been in previous seasons based on the amount of power that we've seen come into some of these kingdoms, right? i.e. 23, i.e. 61, i.e. 30. There's a lot. Even if we look at our migration slot ranking that we did as well, you can see the top kingdoms, 186, right? Even though 232, I think they're full already. But then you look at 142 for EIS, 130 for NA and 30, 111, right? You have 4 kingdoms from the 1 through 90 group that got 100 plus migrants that came in. And so these are just things that I believe do worry me a bit. And I say that because if we are not careful with how we allow... Evelyn, can you get that for me, so please? Thank you, sweetie. If we are not careful about how we expand kingdom powers through migration, mainly, and I'm sure maybe some other means, but mainly that, it can very much snowball into this kind of continuous super kingdom. Because you have to think about it. The players that are really coming into these kingdoms are not new players. They are being recycled because the 1 through 90 kingdoms have been in arguably the same seasons for many seasons now, right? At least 3 to 4, 4 to 5. And there obviously have been some kingdom changes, swaps here and there. But for the most part, and most recently, it's been 1 through 10 and 22 through 90, right? They've been in at least, I think, 3 to 4 seasons. And so, because they're not getting new players into that batch, right, at least until I should say recently, where we have had a little bit more openings, it's not as though, right, you're not like adding more to everyone. It's kind of like taking away from somewhere and then adding it to somewhere else. And so you also have to consider that kingdoms before Kingdom 100 do represent some of the strongest kingdoms, the majority of the strongest kingdoms, strongest alliances, and have the strongest players. The majority, once again, in the game. And my thought is, okay, well, why don't, like, when I think about, okay, well, what are some solutions here? Well, I would say that we just don't allow for an equal number of slots to be provided for every single kingdom in SB2 without factoring in where they currently rank or are in kingdom strength. I didn't necessarily see anything really wrong with the previous system, even if I would have liked for the previous system to be a little bit more custom and tailor-made to where that kingdom's power is, right? So, as an example, maybe in the beginning, right, you would have given kingdoms like 23, maybe you give them 50 spots to bring people in, right? Maybe the second ranked kingdom, it's 50 as well. Maybe the number 3 kingdom is 60 slots, right? Maybe you appropriately assess and gauge how many you need to open, right? While at the same time not allowing for so much massive power gains to be made each season, and you allow the more mid-ranked kingdoms and lower ones to start catching up. These are some ideas, along with, here's another solution that I actually do like. I was thinking about this yesterday. If they were to do a hard power cap on alliances, I actually think this could help out in a number of ways. For example, if they said that you cannot have an alliance over 10 billion power. Why do I like that? I like this for a number of reasons. One is that it forces you to balance your power out amongst multiple alliances, so you would at least have 2, if not more. Number 2, it plays into the warband system because you can have up to 4 alliances participating in that, so you actually get to take advantage. We get to see that being utilized more, which is a feature, by the way, that a lot of people are utilizing, but we could be utilizing it a lot more. Number 3, it would actually force you to bring in, or more likely, bring in mid to like lower powered players, and I'm not saying like a 10 to 15 mil, but let's just say bringing in like free to play low spend players and not having it kind of be more mid to high spend at the higher tier kingdoms, because you would want to considerably fill out your active alliances. And because you could still do the same thing where you just try to have 10 billion alliances as an example, but then you're missing out, right? It almost forces you in a way to build out more or have multiple alliances. Because if you hit 10 bill, you can't accept any other players in, right? So you'd have to drop below 10 bill, or you'd have to fill out those spots with other players that are maybe a little bit lower power, right? So you can't just fill it with a bunch of 100 mil or 100 mil plus or 150 mil plus players. You'd have to fill it out with some lower powered players that still could power up, even if you end up re-exceeding, right, the 10 bill threshold again. So these are some things that I like about it. Not to say that it's maybe a perfect system, and I'd have to really kind of, Shark Tank it out a little bit more. But I'd love to hear what you guys think. Is that something that you kind of like the idea of? Do you have another idea? And at the same time, does this worry you? Because I've seen a number of people, when you look at something like this as a visual, where you kind of see this 15 bill difference between the middle of the pack and the top end. And to me, that's worrisome. Obviously, the kingdoms that are there, I'm sure they're happy about it. But if we're talking about long-term balance, long-term sustainability, being able to encourage more engaging fights, having kingdoms and alliances being comfortable in the matchups because they know that they are fair and we're going to get the best PvP and we're going to get as much engagement and as much contribution and as much interaction from the players as possible, because they know that these kingdoms, that there's a lot of kingdoms that are closer in power rather than being farther out in power. That, I think, is something that we should be aiming to achieve. And instead of it kind of almost coming down to like who's overall stronger, I like to believe it should really come down to who has better strategy, who has better tactics, who's using more IQ, who has better prep and game planning. Those are things I like to look out for. And so anyways, I'd love to know what you guys think. Does this worry you? Does it not worry you? And yeah. Hopefully this is just all, nothing. History has, I think to a degree, told us differently, but we'll see. As always, until the next one, we'll catch you later.